Good morning YouTube, welcome back to my channel. Today's video we are going to be talking about repotting some orchids. So it's a beautiful day out here in British Columbia, bright and sunny, the sun's coming in here. Sorry if I'm squinting or it's too bright for the camera. It's sort of a partially cloudy day, the sun's going to come and go. I've got all the fans off so it's going to get hot in here, it's going to get hot fast. I may have to open the door halfway through this. But anyways, I have done a lot of repotting. Spring is the main time to repot orchids. Being that it's just going into their growth season, you want to repot them just before the pseudobulbs start to grow. If you repot them a few months from now, all the new pseudobulbs are going to have roots on them that are a few inches long, and there's a good chance you're going to break some of those roots. So now's the time to do a lot of your repotting. I've been working really hard on repotting a bunch of stuff in the greenhouse. Cimbidiums, Masdevallias, some Cattleyas, some Phalaenopisis, they've all got repotting. I've literally spent hours and hours of time repotting. Being I spend so much time repotting, I use 4 main ingredients and I just sort of make combinations of them depending on what plant is in front of me. Some plants are going to need a finer mix or a moister mix. Other plants are going to need a drier, airier mix. So I was going to show you the planting materials or the potting media that I use, and we'll just show you the different combinations of what you can use for growing different orchids. I use 4 main ingredients. I use a medium bark, a fine bark, a perlite, and a sphagnum moss. And between all of those ingredients, you can basically make a mix for anything. So I'm going to show you the mixes that I use, and then we'll go down together. I'll show you some of the things I've repotted, some of the things that probably should be repotted, and we'll divide up the mix and show you some different combinations that work well for me. Now, if you're growing in the house, it's much less humid than in the greenhouse, so you may need to add more mosses to the mix where, for example, this one here, it is just a small fir bark and perlite mix for this Cimbidium here, and it's going to be quite happy in there for a good couple of years. Now, on the tag, it's always good to, right when you repot, I just put RP 0315, meaning that I repotted this month, this year. So that's going to be good for next year, the year after, when I look at the tag and go, oh, this hasn't been repotted for a couple years. At first I didn't do that, but now I've got so many orchids I can't remember when I've repotted what and how long it's been in the pot. So that's always a good tip to do that. So I'll put this guy back down. Now I'm going to show you the mixes that I use. They're down here on the floor. And I don't buy the mixes in small little bags. I just can't. I go through 5 or 10 gallons of it in a potting session. I usually put it in my mix in a 5-gallon bucket and go from there. When the 5-gallon bucket is empty, then I will bring up a new mix. But these are my bags of potting mix. This is how I buy it here. I will put the name of the bark in the comments below or in the description so you can Google it. It's a little tricky to find it this big. I just have a friend in the Orchid Society who gets this for me, but it's very cost efficient to buy it in bulk like this. So this is the way I buy the mix. This is a fine mix. It also comes in a medium mix here. You can see this one has been opened, but I have it in a medium mix. And the perlite bag here, well, we've turned the camera somehow. We'll switch it back. The perlite is in the same bag. I've actually cut the top off the bag so it looks smaller, but it was a huge bag that stood about stomach height anyways, 3 or 4 feet tall. Those are my 4 main ones, and then sadly at this point I still buy sphagnum moss in these little tiny things. This is a brick that makes up 8 liters. I can't find a big bale of sphagnum moss. But I know a few places that I could try probably. Just haven't looked hard enough. But anyway, so this is the moss that I use. So why don't I bring you down, we'll show you the mixes individually, and then I'll sort of piece them together and show you a few different combinations that work well for me in this greenhouse. Okay, so I have tons of these white trays around. I get them at the dollar store. They work great for potting media because they have a good high edge, but they're nice and flat. They're not really as dirty as they look. They're just well used and happy here in the greenhouse. So in front of you I have the 4 ingredients that I use in most of my mixes. So we have our medium fir bark, our fine fir bark, perlite, come into the bottom of the perlite, so it's getting a little bit dusty. and sphagnum moss. Basically, with these combinations, I can make a potting media for pretty much anything. So I'm gonna put a new tray in. And what do you guys want to start with here? Sorry, I'm sure that sounds horrible on camera. So why don't we start with Cattleyas? Cattleyas, like an open airy mix. They're an epiphyte. They like to grow in trees. For the most part, my Cattleya mix is going to look like that. I use just open medium fir bark for Cattleyas, and it seems to work fine. Lots of air gets in there, allows for the roots to go in and through, and that is basically going to be it. I might do a top dressing with a bit of sphagnum moss, but other than that, that's what my Cattleya mix looks like. What else do we want to do? A Dendrobium mix. I might take some medium fir bark and a bit of fine fir bark and just a touch of perlite, and it's going to be a fairly open mix, and that's what my Dendrobium mix is going to be like. And I'm just going to empty my tray into my 5-gallon bucket there that I showed you earlier, and we can start over. Alright, I'm just sort of looking around. An Oncidium mix. Oncidiums have finer roots. I will probably use fine fir bark like that. A little bit more perlite than I would have used for the Dendrobiums. And maybe a little bit of moss in there for moisture. Now a lot of times I will cut up the moss, and I just cut it finely like this. And I just want to use a little bit of it. Not too much at all. And that would be a great mix for Oncidiums. And we're just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see what it looks like there. Good Oncidium mix. Alright, for slipper orchids, for paths, I will generally use the fine fir bark. Quite a bit of perlite. Not 50-50, but probably a third of perlite in there. And probably, I'm just grabbing the moss here, I will again chop it up fine and use a mix that has good amount of moss in it. Paphiopedilum, slipper orchids, they don't have pseudobulbs, so you don't want them to dry out. But that looks like a good mix for slipper orchids to me. That's what I would use. So it's going to be quite moist, small little pieces, and I'm just going to make sure you're on camera there. And there is a good slipper orchid bark. What else? Phalaenopsis bark. Phals are a good even mix of everything. I like to put in some larger chunks here. A bit of perlite. Even a bit of the fine stuff. So you got a good fine mix. Now phals, it depends how much you want to water them, but I would probably cut it up like so. And that's going to have not probably as much as the slipper orchids, but more than the Dendrobiums. And then I might also do a top dressing just of sphagnum moss on top of it, so it looks like that. For Cimbidiums, I do a terrestrial mix, and it's basically just going to look like this. A good amount of perlite and a good amount of bark. That's just the fine fir bark for Cimbidiums. What else do I have in here that we could look at? Okay, here's a good one. Masdevallia mix. I am not going to chop up the moss as fine. I'm going to leave it a little bit more airy. I am going to put some perlite right onto the moss so it all kind of forms as one. And then I'm going to just put a few little bits of the fine bark in there. And that would be a great Masdevallia mix right there. Quite a bit of moss, a little bit of bark, quite a bit of perlite really. As for Dracula orchids, I would probably go one step further with the moss and just do it like this. So now you have some even extra moss in there. It's probably a 80% moss mix with 5% bark and 15% perlite in there. That's going to be a good Dracula orchid mix. Now I just, that was the last of my moss there. I'm going to grab some more moss. And I'm not sure what else we can show you. I'm just sort of looking around the greenhouse here. Just looking around the greenhouse. We will put that into my 5-gallon bucket. Got some more moss here. What else do we have? I have my Zygopetalum. That's going to be a terrestrial orchid. I use a medium bark, a fine fir bark, quite a bit of perlite, and they seem to like it a little bit moister than, say, a Cimbidium would. So I'm going to chop up the moss again and put in there. Now this moss is just slightly moist. The rest of the mixes are quite dry. And I like to use the mixes more dry and then give it a good water job after. So that would be a good Zygopetalum mix, I think. What else do I have here? Lycastes, they're going to be, excuse me, a fine mix with a good amount of perlite in there. And then maybe just a touch of sphagnum moss. So you can see with these 4 ingredients, I can make a combination for pretty much any orchid. And just like so. Now, looking around, what else do I have here? We've done Oncidiums. You know, this mix here, if I was to add a little bit more moss to it, would probably be a good mix for the pansy orchids as well. Just like so. Good amount of moss mixed in with the other ingredients there. Now, as I say, I like to do it dry, and I'll show you why here. This was a little rescue Miltonia, and let's just get this guy unpotted really quick, and then we'll pot him back up together. He needs a good pot. So I'm just going to unpot him off camera, and then we will repot him up together. Okay, I changed the angle a little bit. What I did was I took the Miltonia to the sink, unpotted it, gave the roots a good spray off. You can see some new roots starting to grow here. So I left some of the other roots. They seem firm still. I trimmed off a few of the dead roots coming out the back. And let's give this guy a repot. So I did add a bit more mix while the camera was off, just so I didn't run out halfway through. Miltonias compared to Miltoniopsis, the pansy orchids, don't need it quite as moist. So I just added some more fine fir bark and perlite and just a touch of moss. So what I do first is I just make sure the plant is going to fit back in the pot and find sort of a snug spot for it. And then I take the dry mix and I start to backfill right in and around the plant and the roots. And because the mix is dry, it's going to fall right in between the roots there, and the roots will just sort of be frozen exactly where they were in the mix as the mix falls in between them. Now again, being it's spring and the new bulbs are just starting to grow, you can see that if those new roots that I showed you were any longer, there's a good chance that it would I could break them while repotting, and I wouldn't want to do that because that's the future of the plant right there. But I just give that a nice little repot there. Oh, and there comes the fogger on. So I'm just going to go over and stop the fogger. Because it's a little loud on camera there. So it can go back on after. All of a sudden it got warm in here and the humidity dropped and all the misting systems came back on. So this guy here is repotted. Now I'm just grabbing a pencil. I know I should have done all of this ahead of time, but I wasn't really planning on repotting. Nicely in there. I'll take it back to the sink. I'll give it a good watering. And then the media is going to pack in just a little bit tighter around the roots. At that point, I'll come back with my little bit of leftover mix and just sprinkle it on the top to add to it. Make sure on the tag you write on there the date. So you have 0315 and put it back in there so you know when it was last repotted. And this guy here is going to be good to go for at least a year. I'll reassess him next year, but probably even longer than that. So that is a quick video. Well, I don't know how quick it is. That's a video on repotting orchids. Just general sort of talk on repotting them. I hope you liked this video. I hope you found it interesting. For the closing part of this video, I'll just take you around and show you some of the stuff that I have done over this week here. Yeah, we'll go from there. So I'm sure I can't find it all, but I've been really working down here on the Cimbidiums. They all got repotted. And that one here got nicely repotted, and that one has been repotted, and that Cimbidium was repotted. This Cattleya we actually repotted together. This one here, it's in bloom right now. That was the one that had unruly roots. That Cimbidium was repotted. There's a Phalaenopsis, just repotted. There's actually so many of them. There was Oncidium, just repotted. And that's about all that I can show you on this shelf. There's a whole bunch in the back and behind there as well. But anyways, I hope you liked this video. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure you subscribe to my channel. And as always, thanks for watching.